The air in the courtroom was a loaded weapon, heavy with the silence of fortunes about to be won and lost. On one side sat Rafferty Brinsley, the real estate magnate whose name was etched in steel and glass across the city skyline. His face, usually a mask of corporate command, was drawn and pale. Beside him, his lawyer, Mr. Davies, shuffled papers that represented billions. But the real drama was the empty chair on the other side, the chair belonging to his 8 months pregnant wife, Hypatia. And in the front row, a viper in a bespoke suit, sat Katrina Davenport Rafferty's senior VP and mistress. A small, knowing smirk played on her lips as the judge's patience wore thin. She believed she had already won. The Honourable Judge Peterson cleared his throat, the sound echoing like a gavel strike in the cavernous room. "Mr. Davies, we have been waiting for 27 minutes. Where is your client's wife, Mrs. Brinsley?" Rafferty Brinsley felt a cold sweat trace a path down his spine. He couldn't look at his lawyer. He couldn't look at the judge. His gaze was locked on the empty chair beside Hypatia's counsel, Anya Sharma. The chair was a void, a black hole pulling all the certainty from his world. We are unable to reach her, Your Honor." Anya Sharma said, her voice tight with a professionalism that barely concealed her rising panic. "Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Her sister Sophie hasn't heard from her since last night. This is entirely out of character." "Out of character," Mr. Davies scoffed, leaning toward Rafferty. "It's a classic delay tactic. She knows the prenuptial agreement is ironclad. She's trying to garner sympathy." Rafferty nodded, numbly, the words washing it over him. It had to be a tactic. Hypatia, the quiet art historian he had married, the woman who had seemed so overwhelmed by his world of ruthless negotiations and corporate warfare, must have finally learned to play the game. The thought brought a bitter taste to his mouth. He had pushed her to this with his lies, his neglect, his affair. The affair. His eyes flickered to the front row. Katrina Davenport sat with perfect posture, her auburn hair a severe, elegant bob. She met his gaze, and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a gesture of shared commiseration that felt utterly false. "See what she's doing to you." To us, her look seemed to say. Her smirk, the one he'd seen when the judge first noted Hypatia's absence, had vanished, replaced by a mask of concerned support. But he had seen it. And in that moment, it had looked like triumph. Given the circumstances, Judge Peterson announced his patient's gone. "I am postponing this hearing for 48 hours. If Mrs. Brinsley has not appeared or made contact by then, I will entertain a motion to proceed, and I will take her absence into consideration when reviewing the terms of the settlement. Ms. Sharma, I suggest you contact the authorities." The gavel fell. The sound was deafening. Outside the courtroom, chaos erupted. Reporters smelling blood in the water swarmed Rafferty. "Mr. Brinsley, is it true your wife has fled? Is her disappearance related to the divorce?" Katrina was suddenly at his side, her hand on his arm, steering him through the melee like a seasoned bodyguard. "Rafferty, darling, let's get you out of here," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm on his frayed nerves. "She's just trying to make you look bad. She'll turn up tomorrow with some sob story." He let himself be led, his mind a fog of guilt and anger. He hated Hypatia for doing this, for turning their private mess into a public spectacle. He hated himself for giving her a reason to. They reached the black Bentley waiting at the curb. As the driver held the door, Rafferty's phone buzzed. It was Sophie Hypatia's sister. He ignored it. "Don't," Katrina advised, softly sliding into the car beside him. "It's what they want. Engagement, drama. We need to stay above it. Let the lawyers handle her games." "What if it's not a game, Cat?" Rafferty finally whispered, the sheer weight of the possibility pressing down on him. Hypatia was pregnant. She was vulnerable. Katrina sighed a theatrical sound of exasperation. She took his hand, her nails perfectly manicured. "Rafferty, you know Hypatia. She's gentle, yes, but she's not stupid. This is a calculated move to gain leverage. She wants to bypass the prenup and take you for everything she can. She's weaponizing your child. We knew she would fight dirty." He leaned his head back against the cool leather, closing his eyes. Katrina's logic was clean, brutal, and familiar. It was the logic of his world. Hypatia's world was one of soft colors, ancient history, and quiet emotion. The two had never truly mixed. He had broken something delicate and beautiful, and now he was dealing with the shattered pieces. He had chosen Katrina's world. He had to believe in its rules. But as the Bentley pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse and the media frenzy behind, he couldn't shake the image of that empty chair. It wasn't the chair of a cunning strategist. It felt like the chair of a ghost. The next 2 days were a slow-motion nightmare. Anya Sharma, true to her word, had filed a missing person report. 2 detectives from the city's police department, Detectives Chen and Rodriguez, had paid Rafferty a visit at the Brinsley Holdings Tower. The meeting was sterile and brief. "When was the last time you spoke to your wife, Mr. Brinsley?" Detective Chen asked, his pen poised over a small notebook. "Tuesday evening," Rafferty said, his voice flat. "We spoke about the logistics for the hearing, who would drive her, what time she needed to be there." Was the conversation amicable? Rodriguez pressed his eyes, scanning the cavernous office with its panoramic views of the city Rafferty owned. Rafferty hesitated. It was civil. That was a lie. It had been tense and clipped. Hypatia's voice had been thin, brittle. He had ended the call abruptly to take another one from Katrina. "And you have no idea where she might have gone. She has a sister, Sophie Carter, in Boston. Perhaps there—" Rafferty offered, parroting the theory Katrina had been feeding him. Or maybe she rented a place, wanted to get away from the stress. The detectives shared a look. It was a look Rafferty recognized from his own boardrooms. The look of people who weren't being told the whole story. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Brinsley," Chen said, standing. "We'll need to check her phone records, credit card activity. We'd appreciate your full cooperation." "Of course," Rafferty said, showing them out. The moment the door closed, Katrina, who had been waiting in the adjoining room, swept in. "See, they think she just ran off. It's a domestic dispute, not a crime. You need to focus on the business on the hearing. Davies is preparing the motion to proceed. They think I had something to do with it," Rafferty said, sinking into his chair. "I saw the way they looked at me." "Don't be paranoid," she snapped, her tone sharper than usual. "You're the wronged husband. The woman is 8 months pregnant, and she runs off without a word to play games with the court. You are the victim here, Rafferty. Start acting like it." She softened her expression, coming around the desk to massage his shoulders. "We're so close. Once the divorce is finalized, everything will be simpler. It will be just you and me." But it wasn't simple. That night, Sophie Carter called again. This time he answered. Her voice was a raw, ragged thing, torn apart by tears and fury. "Where is she, Rafferty? What did you do to my sister?" "Sophie, I don't know. I swear. I think she just needed some space." "Space!" she shrieked into the phone. Hypatia wouldn't leave without her wallet, her passport, or her prenatal vitamins. They were all on the kitchen counter. She wouldn't leave without talking to me. She was terrified, Rafferty, terrified of her. The word hung in the air between them. Her, Katrina. "What are you talking about?" Rafferty asked, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "Don't play dumb with me. Hypatia told me everything. How Katrina has been cornering her at company events, whispering threats. How she found documents shredded in your home office that she wasn't supposed to see. Hypatia was building a case, not for a bigger settlement, but for a restraining order. She was afraid for her baby. Rafferty's blood ran cold. That's ridiculous. Katrina would never— You know nothing about that woman, Sophie sobbed. And you know nothing about my sister if you think she would just run. Someone took her, Rafferty, and you brought the devil to her door. The line went dead. Rafferty stood in the dark silence of his penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of indifferent stars, shredded documents, threats. It sounded like something from a movie. It couldn't be real. He trusted Katrina. She was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly devoted to him. She had resurrected 2 of his failing divisions, and her counsel had made him hundreds of millions. She understood him in a way Hypatia never could. But Sophie's words had planted a seed of doubt, a tiny, poisonous seed in the barren ground of his conscience. He walked into his home office, the one Hypatia had rarely entered. He looked at the high-end industrial shredder by the desk. It was empty. Of course it was empty. He spent the rest of the night sleepless, pacing the cold marble floors. He replayed the last few months in his head, the subtle ways Katrina had isolated him from old friends, the casual comments she'd made, painting Hypatia as unstable and grasping the way she seemed to know things about his and Hypatia's private conversations. By dawn, the poisonous seed had taken root. The 48-hour deadline for the hearing was looming. The police were treating his wife's disappearance as a marital spat, and the only person he was supposed to trust was the one Hypatia's sister had accused of being a monster. He could no longer rely on Katrina's logic or Davies's legal maneuvering. He needed the truth. And he knew the police with their procedures and protocols wouldn't find it in time. He picked up his phone and made a call to a number he hadn't used in years, a number for a man who operated in the grey spaces between law and consequence. "Frank, it's Rafferty Brinsley. I need your help. I need you to find my wife." Frank Miller was a relic from a different era. He wore a rumpled trench coat regardless of the weather, and possessed a cynicism so profound it was almost an art form. He wasn't impressed by Rafferty's wealth, his tower, or his name. He sat in the visitor's chair in Rafferty's office, nursing a cup of coffee, his gaze missing nothing. "Let me get this straight, Mr. Brinsley." Frank said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "Your 8 months pregnant wife disappears the morning of a contentious divorce hearing. The police think she skipped town. Your girlfriend thinks she's playing games. And your sister-in-law thinks the girlfriend is a psycho. And now, less than 12 hours before the court reconvenes, you want me to perform a miracle." "I want you to find the truth." Rafferty corrected, his voice strained. "Whatever it is." "Truth costs extra," Frank grunted. "Tell me about the girlfriend, Katrina Davenport." Rafferty recounted Katrina's history at the company, her brilliance, her ambition. He tried to be objective, but found himself defending her. "She's tough, but she's not a criminal." Frank just stared at him. "People have done a lot worse for a lot less than half of Brinsley Holdings. I'll start with her. Financials, phone records, travel associates. I'll need a hefty retainer." Rafferty transferred the money without a second thought. For the first time in days, he felt a sliver of hope. Frank Miller didn't deal in emotions or legal tactics. He dealt in facts, and facts were what Rafferty desperately needed. The day dragged on. Frank worked his sources while Rafferty sat in his office, pretending to work fielding calls from a frustrated Mr. Davies about the next day's hearing. Katrina kept texting her messages, a mix of encouragement and pressure. "Stay strong. Tomorrow this will all be behind us. Each message made his skin crawl. Late in the afternoon, Rafferty's executive assistant buzzed him. "Mr. Brinsley, a courier just delivered a package for you. The instructions are very specific. It's to be opened by you and you alone." "Send him in," Rafferty said, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. A young man in a crisp uniform entered and handed him a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax, stamped with an H, Hypatia's stationery. Rafferty's hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a letter several pages long in her elegant, familiar script, and a single small brass key. He began to read. "My dearest Rafferty, if you are reading this, it means I haven't made it to the courthouse. It means that something has gone wrong, and I have not been able to contact Sophie or my lawyer. I pray that you have found this letter in time. I am not writing this to hurt you or to sway the divorce proceedings. I am writing this to save my life and the life of our child. I know about your affair with Katrina, and while it has broken my heart, I have come to understand that our marriage was over long before she entered the picture. This is not about jealousy, this is about fear. For months I have watched her. I have seen the way she looks at you, at your life, at your empire. It is not love, Rafferty. It is conquest. She has been systematically isolating you, manipulating your perceptions, and positioning herself to take everything. I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. You saw me as emotional hysterical. So I started looking for proof. She has been careless. She believes everyone but her is a pawn. In your home office, I found documents she thought she'd shredded properly. Invoices from shell corporations' transfer orders to offshore accounts. Small amounts a death by 1,000 cuts bleeding Brinsley Holdings from the inside. She is stealing from you, Rafferty. And that is the least of her crimes. A few weeks ago, I overheard a call she took in the garden. She was talking about her family, about a company called Davenport Steel. She said your father destroyed her family and that she would see the Brinsley name turn to ash. She wasn't just planning to marry you. She was planning to ruin you. This is not a merger, Rafferty. It is a hostile takeover of your entire life. I have gathered everything I could find. It's not enough for the police, perhaps, but it is a start. It is a trail for someone to follow. The key in this envelope is for a safe deposit box at the downtown branch of Metropolitan Trust Bank. It is registered under my maiden name, Hypatia Carter. Box 713. Everything is there. The financial documents I pieced back together, a recording of that phone call, and my own notes on her activities. Please do not confront her. She is dangerous. She is not the woman you think she is. Give this key and this letter to someone you can trust, someone outside of your circle. If you ever loved me, even for a moment, please believe me now. Find me, Rafferty. Find our son. Yours always, Hypatia. Rafferty read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through a haze of shock and horror. Davenport Steel. He vaguely remembered the name. A competitor his father had acquired ruthlessly decades ago. The owner had been ruined, a tragic story the business papers had briefly covered. He had never made the connection. The lies, the manipulation, the theft, it all clicked into place. The smirk in the courtroom, the threats Sophie had mentioned. It wasn't a game. It was an execution. And he had been sharpening the axe. He snatched his phone and called Frank Miller. "I need you back here. Now," he said, his voice shaking with a rage so cold it felt like ice in his veins. "Forget everything I told you. We're no longer looking for a runaway wife. We're hunting a monster." Frank Miller read the letter, his expression unreadable. He examined the brass key, turning it over in his calloused fingers. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't need to. "Metropolitan Trust," he said, standing up. "Their downtown branch closes in an hour. Let's go. You'll need your ID and your marriage certificate to prove you have a right to access it on her behalf, especially given the circumstances. It'll be a stretch, but your name might be enough to bend the rules." The ride to the bank was silent. Rafferty's mind was a maelstrom of Hypatia's words. It is not love, Rafferty. It is conquest. He had been a fool, blinded by ambition and flattery. He'd mistaken a predator's focus for devotion. He thought back to every conversation, every decision Katrina had influenced, and saw it all through a new, terrifying lens. She hadn't been supporting him. She had been steering him towards the rocks. At the bank, the manager was skeptical, but the Brinsley name, combined with a copy of the missing person report Frank had procured and a veiled threat of legal action from Rafferty, was enough. A nervous employee led them into the vault, the air cool and still. The safe deposit box number 713 was long and slender. The employee slotted the keys, turned the lock, and slid out the metal container before leaving them in a private viewing room. Rafferty's hands shook as he lifted the lid. It was exactly as Hypatia had described. The first file contained financial records, dozens of pages of shredded documents that Hypatia had painstakingly taped back together. They showed a complex web of transactions, small sums siphoned from various Brinsley Holdings accounts and funneled into a shell corporation named KD Solutions. From there, the money trail led to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was a masterpiece of corporate embezzlement, subtle enough to go unnoticed by standard audits. "She's been doing this for at least 2 years, Rafferty breathed, tracing a transfer date with his finger. "Right under my nose. Amateurs steal chunks. Professionals bleed you slow," Frank commented, his eyes scanning the pages. "She's patient. I'll give her that." The next item was a small digital voice recorder. Frank pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, overlaid with the sound of wind and distant traffic. It was clearly recorded outdoors. Katrina's voice was unmistakable, sharp and venomous. "Doesn't matter how long it takes," she was saying. "My father worked for 30 years to build Davenport Steel. 30 years. And Rafferty's father wiped it out in 6 months with lawyers and leveraged buyouts. Called it business. They found my father in his office a week later. He left a note that just said, 'They took everything.' So I'm going to take everything from his son. The company, the name, the legacy. And when I'm done, I'll tear it all down to the foundation, and the Brinsley name will be nothing but a cautionary tale." There was a pause, then a cold, mirthless laugh. "And the best part, the arrogant fool thinks I love him. He's going to hand me the knife himself." Rafferty felt the air leave his lungs. It was a confession, a declaration of war he had been too blind to see. This wasn't about a broken heart or a business rivalry. This was a blood feud. The final item in the box was a leather-bound journal, Hypatia's diary. Rafferty opened it to the last entry, dated the night before she disappeared. He called tonight. The final logistics. His voice was so cold. "He is already gone. I pray this works. My little boy is kicking so much. He knows his mother is fighting for him. Sophie is worried. She wants me to just run to go to the police. But I can't. Without proof, they'll see me as a bitter, hysterical wife. Katrina has made sure of that. Rafferty has to see the truth for himself. It's the only way. I have arranged for the letter to be delivered 48 hours after the hearing is scheduled to start. If I'm not there, it will be his last chance to choose the right side. Tomorrow morning, a car is coming for me. Katrina arranged it. "A peace offering," she said. "A private car to take me to the courthouse so I can avoid the press." She said it was Rafferty's idea. A lie, of course. I know it's a trap. But I have to spring it. It's the only way to make her show her hand. I have the recorder in my purse. I'll try to get her to admit what she's planning. May God protect my son. Rafferty slammed the journal shut. "It was a trap," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She knew it was a trap, and she walked into it anyway. For me. To make me see. She didn't count on being taken, Frank said grimly. She thought she could outmaneuver her. She underestimated how far Davenport was willing to go. He pulled out his phone. The Shell Corporation, KD Solutions. The invoices have an address, a P.O. box, but it's a start. The payments for the consulting fees were authorized by a third party. A name keeps showing up on the wire transfers. Leo Riggs. "Who's Leo Riggs?" Rafferty demanded. Frank's lips tightened into a thin line. "A problem solver, ex-cop, dishonorably discharged for evidence tampering and excessive force. Now he works for hire, private security corporate espionage, making inconvenient people disappear. If Katrina wanted a job done quietly, and Dirty Riggs is the man she'd call." Suddenly the whole picture came into sharp, horrifying focus. Katrina hadn't just orchestrated a disappearance. She had hired a professional criminal to abduct a heavily pregnant woman. Rafferty stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. The grief and guilt that had been churning inside him coalesced into a single burning point of rage. "Find him, Frank." Rafferty ordered, his voice dangerously low. "Find Leo Riggs. I don't care what it costs or what you have to do. Find him. He's going to tell us where she is." Frank Miller operated with an efficiency that was both terrifying and reassuring. While Rafferty was consumed by a helpless fury, Frank was a creature of pure, cold action. He put out feelers through his network of informants, ex-cops and low-level criminals who inhabited the city's underbelly. The name Leo Riggs generated a buzz of fear and respect. He was known for being thorough, brutal, and expensive. "Riggs is paranoid," Frank explained, pacing in front of Rafferty's desk back at the tower. They had less than 6 hours until the court hearing resumed. "He doesn't use his own name for anything. But a guy who owes me big time says Riggs has a soft spot. A specific brand of ridiculously expensive Irish whiskey and a taste for high-stakes poker. There's a game tonight in the back room of a private club called the Gilded Cage. He's a regular." "Then we go there," Rafferty said immediately. "Not we, Mr. Brinsley," Frank countered. "You walk in there, you'll get made in a second. This is my world, not yours. You need to play your part. Go to the hearing tomorrow morning. Act like you know nothing. Act like the concerned husband who's now convinced his wife has abandoned him. Let Katrina think she's won. Let her get comfortable. The moment she relaxes her guard is the moment she'll make a mistake." Rafferty hated the idea of it, of sitting there and playing along with her charade. But he knew Frank was right. A direct confrontation would only make Katrina panic, and God only knew what she would order Riggs to do then. He had to trust Frank. That night was the longest of Rafferty's life. He sat in his silent penthouse, the contents of box 713 spread across his dining table, a shrine to his own stupidity. He listened to the recording of Katrina's voice over and over again, each word a nail in the coffin of the man he used to be. Meanwhile, Frank Miller slipped into the smoky, whiskey-soaked back room of the Gilded Cage. Leo Riggs was exactly as described, a big man with a broken nose and dead eyes, a Glock holstered visibly under his tweed jacket. He played cards with a quiet intensity, losing and winning large sums without a flicker of emotion. Frank didn't approach him directly. He waited. He bought a drink, watched the game, and when Riggs finally cashed out and headed for the exit, Frank followed. In the rain-slicked alley behind the club, Frank cornered him. "Leo Riggs, we need to talk." Riggs turned his hand, instantly going to his weapon. "You've got the wrong guy." "I don't think so," Frank said calmly, holding up his hands. "I'm here on behalf of Rafferty Brinsley. This is about his wife." Riggs's dead eyes showed a flicker of something. Not fear. Annoyance. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Katrina Davenport paid you through KD Solutions, a series of payments over the last 6 months, totaling $250,000. The last payment went through 3 days ago. I have the bank records. I also have evidence linking you to a kidnapping. Now my client is a billionaire. He can make this go one of 2 ways for you. He can hand my evidence to the police, and you can spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison. Or he can be very, very generous. He doesn't care about the money, Riggs. He just wants his wife and child back. Safely." Riggs was silent for a long moment, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He was calculating the odds. His loyalty to Katrina versus a life sentence. It wasn't a difficult calculation. Davenport's instructions were specific, Riggs finally grumbled. "Keep the wife comfortable, isolated. No contact. Make it look like she ran. She was supposed to let her go after the first hearing once the judge saw her as unreliable." "But the plan changed," Frank stated. Riggs nodded slowly. "Davenport got spooked. The sister started calling the cops. The PI started sniffing around." He looked pointedly at Frank. "Yesterday she called me. Said the timeline was extended indefinitely. She transferred another $100,000. Told me to sit tight and wait for further instructions." "Where is she, Riggs?" Frank's voice was like stone. "A property an hour north of the city. A secluded estate her shell company bought 6 months ago. It's quiet, off the grid. She's got food, water, a doctor on call. She's not being harmed. Those were my terms." "Give me the address." Riggs hesitated. "Brinsley's offer better be real." $2 million, Frank said without blinking. "Wired to an account of your choice the moment Mrs. Brinsley is confirmed safe. And a head start before I make an anonymous tip to the police about Miss Davenport. You get your money and you disappear. It's a better deal than she ever gave you." Riggs stared at Frank, then at the darkness of the alley. He made his choice. He scribbled an address on a slip of paper and handed it to Frank. "It's a private road, gated. My 2 guys are there. Tell them Leo sent you to check the plumbing. That's the code. They're not expecting trouble." Frank took the paper. "Pleasure doing business with you, Leo." As Frank walked away, Riggs called out, "Hey, tell Brinsley to watch his back. That woman, she plays for keeps." Frank didn't look back. He was already dialing Rafferty's number. "I've got her." The hearing was in 3 hours. The final act was about to begin. The courtroom felt even colder than it had 2 days ago. Rafferty sat beside Mr. Davies, his face a carefully constructed mask of weary resignation. Across the room, Anya Sharma looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped. The judge had entered his expression grim. And in the front row, Katrina Davenport radiated victory. She was wearing a cream-colored suit, a vision of power and grace. She caught Rafferty's eye and gave him a small, encouraging smile. "It's almost over." Rafferty's heart was a block of ice in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to leap over the railing and throttle her. But Frank's voice echoed in his mind. "Play your part. Let her get comfortable." In the matter of Brinsley versus Brinsley, Judge Peterson began his voice devoid of warmth. "Ms. Sharma, any news on the whereabouts of your client?" "No, Your Honor," Anya said quietly. "We have had no contact." "Then I have no choice but to entertain Mr. Davies's motion," the judge said. As Davies stood up to speak, Rafferty's phone vibrated in his pocket. A single text from Frank. "We're in position. Waiting for your signal." Rafferty felt a surge of adrenaline. Frank, along with a private security team Rafferty had on permanent retainer, all former special forces, was at the gate of the remote property. They were ready to go in. Rafferty just had to give Katrina enough rope to hang herself. "Your Honor," Davies began, "my client has been put in an impossible position. His wife in a clear attempt to manipulate these proceedings, and the media has absconded. We ask that the court accept the terms of the original prenuptial agreement and finalize this divorce without delay." "I am inclined to agree," Judge Peterson said, looking at Anya, "unless you have something to add." Before Anya could respond, Rafferty stood up. The entire courtroom turned to look at him. Davies shot him a furious, confused look. "Your Honor," Rafferty said, his voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even himself, "I would like to address the court, and I would like to ask Ms. Katrina Davenport a few questions." A murmur went through the room. The judge frowned. "Mr. Brinsley, this is highly irregular." Katrina's confident smile faltered for the first time. She looked at him with a flicker of confusion, then alarm. "I believe it is relevant to my wife's disappearance, Your Honor." Rafferty pressed on, his eyes locked on Katrina. "Katrina, you've been my most trusted advisor for years. You know my business inside and out, don't you?" Katrina stood, slowly regaining her composure. "Rafferty, I don't think this is the time or place." "Oh, I think it is," Rafferty said, his voice growing harder. "For example, you're familiar with a company called KD Solutions, aren't you?" The color drained from Katrina's face. It was a subtle shift, but Rafferty saw it. He saw the panic flash in her eyes. "And you're familiar with a man named Leo Riggs." Her composure shattered. "This is absurd. My personal business has nothing to do with this," she hissed. "It has everything to do with it." Rafferty's voice boomed in the silent room. "Because you used my company's money, funneled through your shell corporation, to hire Leo Riggs, a violent criminal, to kidnap my wife." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Peterson banged his gavel. "Order, Mr. Brinsley, you are making extremely serious allegations." "I have proof," Rafferty declared, pulling a USB stick from his pocket, "a copy of everything from the safe deposit box. It's all here, Your Honor. The financial records of her embezzlement, and a recording of Miss Davenport admitting her plan to destroy my family in revenge for what my father did to hers, to Davenport Steele." Katrina stared at him, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. The viper was uncoiled. "You have no idea what you're doing," she snarled, her voice low and menacing. "You're ruining everything." "You did this to yourself," Rafferty shot back. He turned to the judge. "My wife is currently being held against her will at a property you own, Katrina, an estate at 1450 Old Mill Road." He had her. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. She hadn't expected him to find it. She had believed him to be a fool to the very end. As court officers began to move toward a stunned, Katrina Rafferty sent a second text to Frank. "Go." Miles away, the black SUVs of the security team smashed through the wrought iron gate of the estate. Frank Miller led the charge, breaching the front door of the main house. The two guards Riggs had left behind were professional, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. They were subdued in seconds. Frank swept through the house, checking each room. "Hypatia," he called out. A faint cry came from a locked bedroom on the second floor. One of the security men splintered the door with a ram. And there she was. Hypatia Brinsley sat on the edge of a bed, pale and terrified, but alive. Her eyes widened as Frank and the team stormed in. "Mrs. Brinsley, my name is Frank Miller. "Your husband sent me," he said, gently. "You're safe now." Hypatia burst into tears of relief, one hand protectively clutching her stomach, and then her face contorted in pain. She gasped, doubling over. "The baby," she cried out. "I think the baby is coming." The moment Rafferty named the address, 14050 Old Mill Road, the courtroom fractured. The veneer of judicial decorum shattered into 1,000 pieces of raw human chaos. Gasps morphed into a roar of shock and speculation. Judge Peterson's gavel hammered uselessly against the wave of noise. In the center of the storm stood Katrina Davenport, her face a kabuki mask of disbelief, curdling into pure venomous rage. The smirk, the confidence, the meticulously crafted persona, it all evaporated under the harsh courtroom lights, revealing the predator beneath. "You have no idea what you're doing," she snarled, a low, guttural sound that carried across the room. Her eyes, fixed on Rafferty, promised a ruin that went far beyond financial. "You're ruining everything." "You did this to yourself," Rafferty retorted the words, tasting like ash. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a hollow, aching emptiness. He turned from her disintegrating composure to the judge. "My wife is there, Your Honor. She is being held against her will." Bailiffs were already moving their professional calm, a stark contrast to Katrina's sudden, violent outburst as they reached her. She thrashed her bespoke suit, rumpling her voice, rising to a shriek of threats and denials. Detectives Chen and Rodriguez materialized at Rafferty's side, their expressions grim and focused. "Mr. Brinsley, we need a formal statement," Chen began, but Rafferty was already turning away, his attention snagged by the urgent vibration in his pocket. He ripped the phone out. It was Frank. "She's safe." Frank's voice crackled, strained and urgent. "Rafferty, listen to me. We have her. But she's in labor." The stress. It started early. The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the courtroom, Katrina's screams, the judge's calls for order, the frantic whispers of the press faded into an irrelevant hum. There was only Frank's voice and the three words that redefined Rafferty's universe. "She's in labor." "Get her to the best hospital now," Rafferty commanded, his voice raw with a terror that dwarfed everything he had felt before. "Lenox Hill, I'm on my way." He shoved the USB drive Hypatia's entire arsenal into Detective Rodriguez's hand. "Everything you need is on here. I have to go." He didn't wait for a response. He sprinted from the courtroom, a man escaping the smoldering wreckage of his own life. The hallway was a gauntlet of reporters, a blinding constellation of camera flashes, and a cacophony of shouted questions. He pushed through them, a physical force, propelled by a singular, desperate need. He didn't see their faces or hear their words. He only saw Hypatia, alone and in pain. He only heard the frantic, powerful beat of his own heart, a drum pounding out a rhythm of guilt, fear, and a terrifying, unfamiliar hope. The drive to the hospital was a frantic blur of screeching tires and blaring horns. Every red light felt like a personal judgment, every moment of traffic a second stolen from him. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, replaying his last conversation with Hypatia. Her voice thin and brittle, his own cold dismissal. He had hung up on his pregnant wife, who was walking into a trap for him to take a call from the very woman who had set it. The self-loathing was a physical thing, so potent it threatened to choke him. He burst into the hospital's maternity wing, his disheveled appearance drawing stares from nurses and expectant families. He found the waiting room and saw her immediately. Sophie Carter. She stood when she saw him, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed and blazing with a righteous fury. She walked straight up to him and without a word slapped him hard across the face. The sound was sharp, a crack of thunder in the tense silence. "This is your fault," she sobbed, her voice ragged and broken. All of it. She told me she was scared. She told me what that monster was doing, and I told her to run, but she was so determined to make you see. She almost died, Rafferty. Your son almost died. All to save a man who was too blind and stupid to save himself. The sting on his cheek was nothing compared to the searing pain of her words. He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. He simply stood there and took it, because he knew every word was true. I know, he whispered, his own voice cracking. He looked into his sister-in-law's eyes and let her see the utter devastation within him. Sophie, I know. The fight seemed to drain out of her, then replaced by the shared, agonizing weight of their weight. They sat in a tense, shared silence, two strangers bound by their love for the woman fighting for her life just a few doors away. An eternity later, a doctor in blue scrubs appeared at the doorway, his expression tired but kind. Mr. Brinsley. Rafferty shot to his feet, his heart seizing. My wife, is she? She's exhausted, but she's a fighter, the doctor said, a small smile touching his lips. She and the baby are both doing fine. You have a healthy baby boy. A wave of relief so profound and absolute washed over Rafferty, his legs nearly giving out from under him. He leaned against the wall, gasping for air he didn't realize he'd been holding. Sophie was openly weeping beside him, her tears no longer of anger, but of overwhelming relief. The walk to the recovery room felt like the final mile of a marathon he had no right to finish. He pushed the door open tentatively. The room was dim and quiet. Hypatia lay in the bed, looking impossibly fragile against the crisp white sheets. Her skin was pale, her hair damp against her forehead, but her eyes, her beautiful, intelligent eyes, were open and clear. And nestled in the crook of her arm, wrapped in a simple blue blanket, was the most miraculous thing Rafferty had ever seen. She looked up as he entered, and her expression was a complex tapestry of exhaustion, pain, and a profound, bone-deep weariness. There was no anger there, not yet. There was only the quiet aftermath of battle. You came, she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. Tears streamed down Rafferty's face, hot and unrestrained. He crossed the room and knelt by her bedside, afraid to touch her, to taint this sacred space with his failures. I got your letter, Hypatia. He choked out the words ripped from his soul. I'm sorry. God, I am so sorry. For everything. He reached out a trembling hand, not to her, but to the tiny bundle in her arms. He gently touched his son's cheek, the skin impossibly soft. The baby stirred a small noise of protest, escaping his lips, before his tiny, perfect fingers curled instinctively around Rafferty's thumb, a grip of surprising strength. In that single simple touch, the entire axis of Rafferty's world shifted. The Brinsley Empire, the skyscrapers that scraped the clouds, the billions in assets, it was all meaningless, colorless dust compared to the vibrant, terrifying, beautiful reality of this tiny hand holding his. This was his legacy, not the steel and glass, but this life, this family. His name is Owen, Hypatia said softly, her eyes watching him. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm of healing. The legal proceedings against Katrina unfolded on television screens and newspaper headlines in a world that felt 1,000,000 miles away. The evidence was irrefutable. Leo Riggs, facing a life sentence, testified against her in exchange for a lesser charge detailing her cold, meticulous plan. The media painted Katrina as a modern-day Borgia, a story of Shakespearean revenge and corporate psychopathy. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 30 years in a maximum security prison. Rafferty saw a photo of her being led away, her face a mask of cold, unrepentant fury, and felt nothing but a distant pity. He was in a different world now, a world that operated on a 3-hour cycle of feeding, changing, and sleeping. He handed the day-to-day operations of Brinsley Holdings to his executive board, ignoring the frantic calls from Mr. Davies about market reactions and shareholder meetings. His entire focus had narrowed to the quiet rooms of his home, which Hypatia had reluctantly agreed to return to. They didn't speak of the future, or even of the past. They communicated in the unspoken language of new parents. He would bring her a cup of tea, just the way she liked it, while she nursed Owen in the early morning light. She would watch him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, as he clumsily but determinedly learned to swaddle their son. He took the night shifts, sitting in a rocking chair with Owen against his chest, whispering apologies and promises to the sleeping infant, hoping that somehow his wife in the next room could hear. He was courting her again, not with diamonds and galas, but with the quiet currency of dependability. He was proving one sleepless night at a time that he was present, that he was here to stay. One evening, months after Owen's birth, they were sitting on the sofa. The city lights twinkled through the vast windows, no longer a symbol of his domain, but simply a backdrop to the peaceful quiet of their home. Owen was asleep in his bassinet, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Hypatia turned to him, her expression serious. "Can we be fixed, Rafferty?" He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the scars of his betrayal in the faint lines of caution around her eyes, but he also saw the resilient, incredible woman who had faced down a monster to save them. The woman who had given him a son. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were," he answered, his voice raw, with the honesty he had denied her for so long. "I think that person, the man I was, is gone. And he should be. But I think we can build something new. Something better. Something real." Hypatia searched his eyes, looking for the truth. After a long moment, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He hesitantly, carefully wrapped his arm around her. It was not a gesture of passion, but one of comfort, of companionship. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning, a fragile, hard-won, and infinitely precious beginning, built not on a foundation of wealth and power, but on the quiet, resilient promise of a new day. The story of Rafferty and Hypatia Brinsley isn't just a tale of betrayal and corporate greed. It's a raw look at the quiet battles fought behind the closed doors of a gilded cage. It shows us how the deepest deceptions can come from those we trust the most, and how true strength isn't found in a boardroom, but in the courage to fight for your family against all odds. Their journey through darkness to a fragile dawn is a powerful reminder that even after the most devastating storms, a new life and a new beginning can take root. What would you do if you discovered the person closest to you was secretly your greatest enemy? What lengths would you go to protect the ones you love? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved, you please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a gripping real-life drama, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.